So I'm finally finished with the UnattendedWinstall version 2.0 update, and in this video I want to take you through the installation process on both Windows 11 and Windows 10 and take you through what's changed, what you can expect, and explain why some things are the way that they are. So starting with this Windows 11 24H2 setup here, this is the first screen you're going to be seeing, and on the Windows 11 installation you're going to notice that there's a window at the bottom left here, and if I just maximize this window, you'll see it's a C script file that's scanning for a newly created system registry hive file to disable the Windows Defender services. So this is a script created by Schneegans, which I use to create the base answer file. And you don't need to do anything with this. You can just leave it minimized at the bottom here. You'll see on Windows 10, you don't even see this window, but it's important that you don't close this or else these scripts won't run properly. So on the first window here, you'll obviously just select your language and time and currency format. I'll just leave US selected, then click on next. You can select your keyboard settings. I'm just going to click on next. It's going to install the Pro edition of Windows 10 or Windows 11 by default. So you won't have an option to choose between Windows versions anymore. It's just going to be the Pro edition of Windows by default. Then you can still choose your disk where you want to install Windows. I'm just going to select this disk and then click on next. And that's then going to start the Windows 11 installation. Now I'm obviously going to speed up parts of this video and I'll just mention the important parts as we get to it. So once you get to this part of the Windows installation on Windows 11, this is the specialized phase of the Windows installation, and this is where most of the scripts are going to be run. So once it gets to 58%, you're going to see the script start running on the computer here, and these windows will pop up. Now it is important to mention that on your installation, you might not see these windows because I'm going to hide them. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to explain what's happening. So this first script is going to search for the .NET Framework 3.5 file on the Windows installation media. And then once it finds it, it's automatically going to enable .NET Framework 3.5 on the Windows installation. And then once it's finished, it's going to launch the main UnattendedWinstall script file, and the first thing it's going to do is it's going to uninstall all of the bloatware apps, the UWP apps, which it's doing now. And it basically just runs all of the scripts that I have in the UnattendedWinstall script PowerShell file. And I'll show you that at the end of the video so you can see what's happening. It sets a whole bunch of registry entries. And then what it's doing now is it's setting services to manual, where the permissions are allowed, and it's also going to disable scheduled tasks. But a lot of these things are happening really fast, so we can't see all of it, but I will show you that at the end of the video when we inspect the answer file. And once again, you're not going to see this happen during your Windows installation because these windows are going to be hidden. Now, once that's finished, it's going to automatically restart and continue with the last part of the Windows installation before we get to the onboarding phase. So during the onboarding experience, you'll need to select your country or region again and your keyboard layout. And if you want to add a second keyboard layout. Now I am connected to the internet during this installation of Windows. I generally do recommend that you disconnect from the internet when installing Windows, so it doesn't install these updates. But for the purposes of this video, I wanted to be connected to the internet to show you what will happen when the computer does updates during this onboarding experience. So after the updates, next we can choose a username. I'm just going to choose M, then click on next, and it's going to finish up with the last part. It's checking for Windows updates again. And now it's loading into the user profile. So once you get to the desktop, it's going to stop the Explorer process, and then you're going to see this screen. And this basically runs the current user script, but it also prompts you with some very important settings. So the first thing that you'll see here is if your recommended user settings have been applied successfully or not. In this case, it has been applied. And then there's also a message to visit the scripts folder in this path if you want to reapply or revert any of the settings in the UnattendedWinstall answer file. Now there's also going to be a desktop shortcut to the UnattendedWinstall script, so you can also just run it from there if you don't want to navigate to this file path. But because I've decided in UnattendedWinstall version 2 that I'm only going to have one answer file and I won't have different versions, it is basically the core version of the previous file, but with the option to change some of the settings. But Windows Defender is disabled by default, and you can enable it here or with the UnattendedWinstall script later. But once you do that, it can't be disabled again. So if you're someone who wants to have the Windows Defender services disabled, then don't enable it here. But this is a security prompt, and if you want to enable it, you can do it here or with the script later, like I'm going to show you in this video. Then next, user account control is also disabled by default. and you can enable it here or in control panel later if you need to. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave both of those disabled, and then I'm just going to restart to apply the changes and then confirm this prompt, and then I'll show you what it looks like once we get to the desktop. So this is what you'll see on Windows 11 once you get to the desktop. Dark mode is enabled by default. The dark mode wallpaper is enabled by default. And then the taskbar is also cleaned up, where you just have the start button and the file explorer icon. Now on the desktop, you'll notice that Microsoft Edge is still installed, and then here's the UnattendedWinstall script file, which we can use to install software and more, and we'll get to that in a moment. If I open the start menu, all of the pinned icons are gone. You can just right click on the get started icon here and then remove it from the list. And if we have a look at all apps, I've only included the calculator and notepad because that's what I use personally. But if you don't want these, you can just go ahead and uninstall them by right-clicking and then uninstalling them. Now you'll notice that Microsoft Edge is still installed, and I've decided to just keep that a part of the operating system in these answer files, and I'm not interested in trying to remove or uninstall it in this version of the UnattendedWinstall answer files. So the next thing I want to show you is if we open the UnattendedWinstall script here, this is basically what you're going to see. So you've got a software and apps section where you can install software or remove bloatware apps. Now, these scripts have already been applied if you installed Windows using the UnattendedWinstall answer file. This script is basically here to reapply or revert settings in case Windows updates changed settings again, or if you're having issues on Windows, you can revert it back to the defaults to see what's causing those issues. But in the install software section, if we go to section 1, you have the option of installing the Microsoft Store. I've also got a browser menu where you can install a browser, or you can install UniGet UI, which is a software manager that you can also use to download more apps. But for the purposes of this video, I just wanted to show you that you can install the Microsoft Store with this. So I'm going to select option 1. And you obviously have to be connected to the internet for this. And as you can see, the Microsoft Store is going to be installed silently in the background, and you need to wait a few minutes for it to install, and then you can use it to reinstall the necessary apps manually. If we go to the start menu, you'll see there's no Microsoft Store yet, but it is being downloaded in the background and it's going to show up soon. So let's just continue with the rest of the script. So next, I've got a privacy and security section here. If we open that, we can check the Windows Defender status. So if I check that, it says Windows Defender is permanently disabled. And I also give a warning here saying that if you enable Windows Defender using the script, you have to basically reinstall Windows with the UnattendedWinstall answer file before you can disable it again. If I press 1 to enable, I'll get another prompt asking if I'm sure that I want to enable it. At this point, you can press Y for yes or N for no. I'm just going to press Y to enable it. It's going to be enabled, but you'll have to restart your PC for it to take effect. So we'll go back to the main menu. Then in the privacy and security section, once again, you have the same check for the user account control status, and then you can apply the recommended privacy settings, which is applied by default, or you can apply the Windows default privacy settings. Now let me just show you what these privacy settings are in the settings app, and you can see that there's the Microsoft Store just installed now. But if we go to the settings app and we go to privacy and security, it's basically these settings that you find under general, that's all turned off. The same with these diagnostic and feedback settings, that's all turned off by the answer file and the activity history. And that's the same with the Windows update settings. If we go to the Windows updates menu, you have the option of setting the recommended update settings, which basically disables automatic updates, and updates will only be installed once you allow them to be installed, or you can set the Windows default update settings. If we go to the Optimize Registry tab here, you also have the option of setting recommended or default settings, and these settings include everything from Windows optimizations and customizations, like enabling dark mode and all of that, and you can inspect the XML answer file to see a complete list of everything that's going to happen when you run these options. If we go back to the main menu and we have a look at the tasks and services, you can enable minimal services or default services, and you can disable unneeded scheduled tasks or enable all scheduled tasks. And then lastly, I also have a power settings menu here, where you also have the option of setting recommended or default power settings. Now, like I mentioned before as well, all of the recommended settings are going to be applied by default if you installed Windows using the UnattendedWinstall answer file. So you don't have to go and apply them again. But if you found that Windows Update reverted some of these settings, you have the option of reapplying them or reverting it back to default, or you can use this script on an existing Windows installation to basically achieve the same thing as the UnattendedWinstall answer file. So I'm just going to exit the script and then close the settings as well. And if I just launch the Microsoft Store, you can see that it is working and you have access to the Microsoft Store if you needed that. So that's it for Windows 11. So let's quickly run through the Windows 10 setup. This is the first screen that you'll be seeing. If you go to the second screen, like I mentioned before, you'll only have the Pro edition of Windows to select. There won't be any other versions available. And then you'll have the option of choosing the drive where you want to install Windows. And then it's going to start the Windows installation. So just like with the Windows 11 installation, I'm just going to speed up parts of this video until it gets to something important that I need to mention. So during the specialized phase of Windows 10 as well, the scripts are going to start running. And the first script is going to be the one that enables .NET Framework 3.5 from the cab file that's found on the Windows ISO file. So once that's done, it's going to run the main UnattendedWinstall script, which removes the bloatware apps, sets privacy settings, sets the Windows update settings, optimizes the machine and user registry, and then also disables unneeded scheduled tasks and sets some unneeded services to manual. And like I mentioned during the Windows 11 installation as well, you won't be seeing these windows during your Windows installation like you're seeing now because they'll be hidden. I'm just showing it to you in this video so you can see what's happening and I can explain to you what the file is doing. And then once that's finished, it's going to restart once again and it's going to take us to the Windows 10 onboarding experience. First, we can choose our region, then we can choose a keyboard layout and a secondary if we need. Then we can enter our username, choose a password if we like. Now, I'm not connected to the internet right now like I was on the Windows 11 installation, but it doesn't matter. The UnattendedWinstall answer file does not need internet to execute its commands. So once you get to the desktop, once again, it's going to load the user account customization screen. And on Windows 10, this Microsoft Edge banner is in your way. So you can just click on maybe later and then it goes away. But once again, you can see if the user account settings have been applied successfully. Windows Defender Services is also disabled by default. And you have the option of enabling it here or with the script later, like I showed you on Windows 11 as well. And the same thing with user account control. I'm going to leave both of these disabled and then just restart to apply any changes if we made any. And then once we've restarted, this is what you can expect to see. The taskbar is clean and then we've got Microsoft Edge and a shortcut to the UnattendedWinstall script file. The start menu is also clear and it also only has the calculator and then the legacy notepad app, as well as the snipping tool. All of the bloatware apps have been removed. Windows Defender is also disabled if you choose to have it disabled, and stuff like the notifications, privacy settings, all of that is turned off by default. The same with the privacy settings, just like on Windows 11. You can see everything is turned off. A whole bunch of telemetry is turned off. Background apps will be turned off. And generally, overall, this experience of Windows might just be a little bit better. Now, just to show you, if I were to go and apply all of the default settings, so let's apply the default privacy settings. I'm going to apply the default Windows update settings. If we go to the registry optimizations and we set the default registry settings, go to tasks and services, enable default services, and then do the same with the scheduled tasks and the power settings. If I set all of this to default and then restart the PC, you're going to see it's basically reset to the default Windows settings, except for the apps. Once the Windows apps have been removed, you have to install those manually. But if we have a look at the settings, like the privacy settings, for example, you can see these privacy settings have all been turned on. Background apps has been turned on. All of that's been turned on. Same with the notifications. You have full control over this. But if this is the experience of Windows you want, you can just install Windows using a stock Windows ISO and you don't need any of these scripts. I'm just going to go ahead and apply all of the recommended settings once again, then restart the computer so we can see if it actually made a difference. Disable unneeded scheduled tasks and then set the power settings to the recommended power settings. And then let's go ahead and restart quickly. And there we go. We're back to the UnattendedWinstall experience. If you have a look at the settings once again, notifications, everything's been turned off. Privacy settings have all been applied and we're basically back to where we were at the start of the unattended winstall experience. So if we inspect the unattended winstall version 2 answer file, I want to run through it with you quickly. So you have these different passes. The first one is going to be the Windows PE pass, and you're going to see these things are going to be repeated 3 times. That's because it applies it to different processor architectures. So the first one is going to be for 32-bit or x86 processors. If you then scroll down all the way, the next one is going to be applicable to ARM64, and then the very last one is going to be applicable to AMD64, or it means 64-bit versions of Windows. Now, this is the type of processor that most people will have, so I'm just going to run through this part, but the other 2 parts are exactly the same. So the first section here means it's going to install the Pro version of Windows by default. It's not going to activate Windows by default. You still have to activate Windows on your own. This is just a generic key to define which Windows version it needs to install. Then it's going to accept any of the license terms automatically. Then these first few commands here is going to bypass the Windows 11 system requirements. And then the next few commands here is going to disable the Windows Defender services from starting automatically. And it does this at the start of the Windows installation to ensure that it can be disabled. So that's what the rest of these commands do. Then you're going to find the next phase, which is the specialize phase, and that's going to be repeated 3 times as well. Once again, you have the x86 version, then you've got the ARM64 version, and then you've got the AMD64 version, or the 64-bit version. And once again, they're all the same. They're just defined 3 times, so it applies it to those architecture types. With x86 or 32-bit, Windows 11 doesn't even have that, so that's basically only for Windows 10 versions. But each of these orders have a comment here, so this loads scripts in this file that's defined at the bottom, which I'll show you later. This order disables user account control, which can be enabled later. This order enables running of PowerShell scripts. This order skips the forced Microsoft account creation. And then this order runs the script to enable .NET Framework 3.5 by default. This order creates a specialized marker file so that the unattended winstall script file knows whether it's running during the specialized phase or if a user has run it manually. The next order here creates the shortcut to the unattended winstall script file. Next, it loads the default user registry hive, so changes can be made to it. Then this command adds a registry key so that the user account customization file can be run once a user is logged in for the first time. Next, it unloads the default registry hive, because we're not going to be making changes to it anymore. This cleans up temporary scripts that were saved in the temp folder. And then lastly, it deletes the specialized marker file so that once the unattended winstall script is run manually by a user, it doesn't detect the marker file anymore and it doesn't just automatically run the commands. Then you have the onboarding experience commands. Once again, 86, ARM64, and then AMD64 or 64-bit. And this basically just skips a whole lot of those screens so you don't have to go through each of them. This extra script is commands, so we can run PowerShell files and XML files and .registry files and all of that. Then the first file or script that's defined here is the .NET Framework file. The second file is the unattended winstall script, and this file is large and very long, but this is the scripts that's being run during the unattended winstall setup, and it's also the same script that you run from the desktop that I showed you earlier in this video. So basically you're going to see there's a lot of menu functions, and then you'll reach the end of the menu functions. Here are some marker files to determine if we're in the specialized phase of the Windows installation or not. And then it's going to start the command and operation functions. So all of these functions below here are functions that's going to be used by the script, and some of these will be automatically executed during the specialized phase of the Windows installation. So if we scroll down all the way in this file until we reach the end, you're going to see that this checks if it's running in the specialized phase to apply these settings automatically during the Windows installation. So it's going to remove bloatware apps, then legacy Windows apps and features. Then it's going to run these functions here where it sets apps registry files, removes OneDrive, disables recall. It sets the recommended privacy settings, sets the recommended update settings. The same with local machine registry, because the current user registry can only be applied once the user has been created and logged in. And that's that user account customization screen you see once you load into the user for the first time. Then it's also going to disable scheduled tasks, set manual services, and then set the recommended power settings. So if you want to see in detail what each of these functions do, you can basically select it once you're in a code editor. And if you press Ctrl and F and you search up, you're going to see the function to set the recommended privacy settings. And what this basically does is it's going to set a whole bunch of registry entries, and you can see exactly where those registry entries are going to be made, what it's going to do, and what it's going to apply. But moving on, if the unattended winstall script is not run during the specialized phase, meaning it's run manually by a user, it'll always just show the main menu until a user exits the script. But if we move on to the next file that's defined in the answer file here, this file just creates the unattended winstall script shortcut on the desktop. And then lastly, we have this file that's the user account customization file that you see once the user logs in for the first time. And you basically already saw what this does. It just brings up a screen showing if the recommended user settings applied successfully. So that's what this does, is it basically uninstalls Copilot and applies a whole bunch of these registry settings that I defined here. And that's also the same registry settings that gets applied once you set the recommended registry settings with the unattended winstall script file, if you do that manually. But it basically applies all of these registry entries to the current user. It sets the default wallpaper depending on if you have Windows 10 or Windows 11. And then depending on what options you choose, it's going to execute some commands. And then lastly, you can restart the PC, and that's that restart button there. Then the very last file here is just a layout modification for Windows 10's start menu. So it basically unpins all of the tiles. And that's the end of the answer file. But that's going to be it for this video. Go ahead and try out the unattended winstall version 2 answer file for yourself. And then let me know what you think in the comments down below, or on the GitHub discussions page, or the Discord community. I really hope you find some value out of the project and this video. But with that being said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.